Welcome, welcome, welcome to episode 332 of the show with no name. I'm your humble host, Nick, and in today's episode, we're going to be visiting the Saltese Cemetery out here in Spokane, Washington. I have a lot to talk about in today's episode, so let's get into it. Nestled in the quiet hills southeast of Spokane, Washington, Saltese Cemetery is a small, unassuming burial ground with a rich and somewhat mysterious history. Although it lacks the huge size of the larger cemeteries in the area, the Saltese Cemetery holds a unique place in the history of Spokane County and the surrounding region. Established in the late 19th century, the cemetery has weathered over a century of changes, from the ebbs and flows of nearby settlements to shifts in land ownership and community development. Its story is intertwined with the broader history of the Pacific Northwest, particularly as it relates to early settlement, agricultural growth, and the transformations of small communities in eastern Washington. The beginnings of the Saltese Cemetery date back to the late 1800s, a time when eastern Washington was experiencing an influx of settlers. These pioneers were largely drawn to the region by the promise of fertile farmland, the opportunities afforded by the westward expansion of the railroads, and the booming mining industries nearby in Idaho and Montana. Spokane itself, which was founded in the 1870s, was rapidly becoming a hub for trade and transport, with settlers moving outward from the city to establish smaller farming communities. The Saltese Cemetery takes its name from the nearby Saltese Flats, a region named after Chief Andrew Saltese, a prominent member of the Coeur d'Alene tribe. The chief was known for his efforts to negotiate peaceful relations between the indigenous tribes and the white settlers in the inland Northwest, including the turbulent periods of the mid to late 19th century. Although the exact date of the cemetery's founding is not well documented, burial records suggest that it was established in the 1880s or the 1890s. Many of the individuals buried here were pioneers who had homesteaded in the area. These early residents of the Saltese Flats and the surrounding communities lived in modest homes, often relying on agriculture and livestock for survival. The cemetery itself was likely a simple, practical response to the need for a local burial ground, and its small size reflects the relatively sparse population of the area during that time. The Saltese Flats, located near the cemetery, were once a fertile agricultural area, attracting settlers who sought to farm the rich soil. However, this landscape was often subject to flooding and drainage issues, which made farming unpredictable. In the early 20th century, efforts were made to drain the flats to make the land more suitable for agriculture and development. Despite these efforts, farming remained a challenge, and as time passed, many families either moved on or diversified their livelihoods. During this period, the population of the surrounding area remained relatively small, and the Saltese Cemetery served as a final resting place for a number of the area's early families. The cemetery, like many rural cemeteries of the time, was informal in nature, with simple headstones marking graves. Over time, some of these headstones have weathered or been damaged, adding to the cemetery's somewhat mysterious atmosphere today. As Spokane, Washington continued to grow and expand throughout the 20th century, The communities surrounding the Saltese Flats underwent significant changes. What was once a primarily agricultural area began to give way to more suburban development, particularly in the post-World War II era. The demand for land increased, and the construction of new roads and housing developments began to encroach on these previously rural areas. Despite these changes, Saltese Cemetery remained, quietly nestled in its hillside location, even as the world around it transformed yet again. I have a few people to talk about in today's episode, and I'm going to start out with Thomas C. Benoit. And he was born sometime in March of 1863 in Wisconsin. And he would pass away on December 20th, 1927. I found an article on his death that reads, "Blacksmith slain by wife. Woman claims she shot her husband in self-defense as he attacked her." Mrs. Benoit, age 60, shot her 65-year-old blacksmith husband to death because he attacked her with an iron rod, according to her story made public today. Thomas C. Benoit was killed at his home in Idaho, 75 miles east of here on Tuesday, and the woman was charged with first-degree murder after a jury decided she shot him yesterday. Thomas came home that Tuesday night and had been drinking, his widow told the jury, when he took an iron rod and started for her. She jumped to a sewing machine drawer, took out an automatic pistol, and fired twice, hitting him on the back of the head as he charged towards her with his head lowered, the woman said. All night long, she sat with the body of her husband in the house. And when dawn came, she went out and told the neighbors that she had killed him, claiming self-defense. The house gave evidence of a fearful struggle. The couple had quarreled before, county records show. Mrs. Benoit had her husband arrested that previous Sunday on a disorderly conduct charge, and he was released to appear for court hearing yesterday. The woman is Benoit's fourth wife. He was a blacksmith and he had lived in the area for 35 years and was well-to-do. I also found this really interesting story about a woman whose name was Wilhelmina Haas, and she was the wife of a local pastor in the area back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. She was born in Austria on April 13th, 1858, and she would live to the age of 69, passing away on September 3rd, 1927, in Spokane County. Her husband was born in 1844 in Germany, and his name was Louis Haas. And at some point, they immigrated to the United States from Germany, and they made it all the way out to Washington State. One of the interesting things about Mrs. Haas's life is in the summer of 1914, she was actually struck by lightning, and the burns she received caused her to go blind, among other things, but she continued to live on for a number of years after that. And last but not least, there's Beatrice Pugh, and she was born on July 13th, 1896 in Spokane, Washington. And she would pass away at the young age of 12 on June 9th, 1909. Her cause of death was scarlet fever. I hope you enjoy the rest of the videos of the Saltese Cemetery, and stay tuned for another minute or two because I have a photo montage of a bunch of people that are buried in this cemetery that I couldn't find very much information on. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.